So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our session, Cyberviolence Against Tunisian Women on Social Media, from Worst to Deed. My name is Nora Gharyeni. I'm an occupational psychologist and ergonomist intern at Untitled, and I'm today with my colleague, Chayma Fourati, R&D engineer in artificial intelligence at Untitled, and we're covering the subject of cyber violence against women in Tunisian context, and we present you our services capable of detecting and analyzing cyber violence against women on the internet using artificial intelligence. Did you know that 4 out of 5 women have been targets of online violence, according to a study carried out by CREDIF, the Center for Research Studies, Documentation and Information on Women? Millions of women and girls around the world are subjected to cyber violence because of their gender. Cyber violence against women and girls knows no boundaries, cutting across borders, race, culture, and income groups, profoundly harming survivors, people around them, and society as a whole. Cyber violence against women is emerging as a global problem with serious implications for societies and economies around the world. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women defines online violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that is committed, facilitated, or aggravated fully or partially by the use of ICTs in which targets a woman because she is female or specifically affects women. The growing reach of the internet, the rapid spread of mobile information and the communications technologies, and the wide diffusion of social media have presented new opportunities and enabled various efforts to address cyber violence. However, they are also being used as tools to inflict harm on women and girls. The Me Too movement sparked a global phenomenon on social media of sharing personal experiences and expressing solidarity with survivors of sexual harassment and abuse. In Tunisia, thousands of women have participated in the NZD campaign, the Tunisian version of Me Too, which rose in popularity following allegations of sexual harassment and public indecency against a newly sworn member of parliament. Recently, he was sentenced to 1 year. While the thousands of testimonies that women started online and shared online have powerfully exposed the prevalence of sexual harassment in Tunisia and demonstrated the need for the government to ensure there are legal remedies and psychosocial resources in place to protect Tunisian women, these testimonies also reveal new forms of gender-based violence currently emerging via Facebook, the social media platform with the most users in Tunisia. More recently, Solidarity Movement, لآلتنا, denounced the digital campaign of defamation, stigmatization, and incitement to hatred against Tunisian women activists, after women human rights defenders carried the coffin of deceased human rights figure Lina Ben-Biouni. Following the same path, the movement also took place in different universities against violence and harassment. CREDIF carried out a study in 2019 entitled Digital Violence Against Women, the case of Facebook, which showed that 89% of Tunisian women have experienced or been victims of online violence in one way or another. The study used qualitative and quantitative data. They used samples from social media pages, a survey that targeted 573 women victims of cyber violence. And unfortunately, we weren't able to find so many research papers on the situation of Tunisian women on social media as we lack studies on this field. Besides, the COVID-19 pandemic and our increased presence online have drawn attention to technology-facilitated violence and systemic attacks directed at human rights defenders, women in politics, journalists, bloggers, and minorities, among other groups. The spread of cyber violence against women constitutes a threat to those using social media to express their opinions feelings, and views on diverse topics. However, there is the tendency to dismiss these forms of attacks or to diminish their effects, perhaps due to an assumption that they are less harmful because they are occurring online. And yes, even though cyber violence starts online, we should know that it could also move to the real world. The relationship between violence offline and online can be described as a fluid. For example, when sexual abuse is filmed and spread on social media, the violence does not only take place offline, but also online, or when women receive online threats followed by attacks on the street, and these attacks are supported and spread online, the violence also takes place both offline and online. So what are the forms of cyber violence in Tunisian context? According to the study carried out by Critif, 51% of women had experienced verbal violence on Facebook. 24 of them had been victims of sexual harassment, and 19 of them had suffered from psychological harassment. As with the violence committed in person or in the real world, cyber violence can have negative consequences for the women who are victims. It can have psychological consequences such as stress, eating disorders, symptoms of post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, phobias. It can also lead to social isolation of the women who are affected by it. They can also suffer from economic damage. According to the study carried out by Critif, 58% of survivors live in a state of anxiety. 94 of them have trouble communicating with their families, and 44 have cut their social ties. According to the Public Safety Canada, cyber violence could have more serious consequences than traditional victimization because of the unique characteristic of virtual environment in where the violence is being committed, like anonymity, speed, and easy access to victims, for example. In Tunisia, legal texts do not cover the specificities of different forms of cyber violence. Existing legal texts vaguely tackle these issues, which hinders the ability to respond to the degree of severity of the committed crime. They also lack a gender-based approach. Looking at cyber crimes and cyber-related laws from a gender-based perspective is important to develop a gender-sensitive crime prevention strategy and to ensure a more comprehensive approach to countering cybercrime and cyber violence. Tunisia's Organic Law of 2004 on personal data ensures protection of personal data on its processing. However, cyber violence and other forms of online violence are still not addressed. Law 58 of 2017 regarding the elimination of violence against women does not explicitly mention cyber violence. According to the Critif study, 95% of cyber violence victims do not press charges. The slow pace of judicial proceedings distracts some from taking legal actions. Unfortunately, currently under Law 58, victims cannot obtain an order from an investigating judge to start a lynching campaign on social media or to delete a video as quickly as possible. The Tunisian justice system is not up to date to deal with this kind of very particular case, which requires a certain technical treatment, a legal framework that defines it with its various forms as well as consequences. In partnership with the United Nations Population Fund in Tunisia, Critif has launched an awareness campaign to help women go further by taking screenshots and showing them to judicial officers to attest the veracity of the acts and file a complaint with a special unit for investigating crimes against women. The campaign, Digital Violence is a Crime, even here it will be prosecuted, aims to define the digital violence suffered by women, raise awareness among the public about its negative impact, inform victims about their rights, and encourage them to break the silence. It is important to act before we regret it. I leave now the floor to my colleague Chayma to show you how we can analyze from a wide range of data published online, on social networks, in Tunisian language, and related to violence against Tunisian women using artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Nora. So in order to showcase such behaviors, we will present 3 real Tunisian use cases, 3 women that have suffered from cyberviolence. Then we will showcase the consequences that happen to each of them. In order to collect, analyze, and classify opinions, hate speech, and misogynistic behavior online, we used our tool created by iCompass called Raycom. Raycom understands the Tunisian dialect, Arabic, and French languages. And that is exactly what we use in our everyday conversations. Raycom is based on artificial intelligence and particularly natural language processing. The first use case we will start with is Abir Moussi, who is head of a Tunisian political party. She was the victim of multiple hate, abusive, and misogynistic speech and insults across the internet. Results about opinions about her across her videos on YouTube are as follows. So we have over almost 2K comments, 68% of them negative and 32% positive. We find negative comments written in Tunisian dialect, Arabic, and also in French. Focusing more on the topics discussed, we find that 41% happens to be misogynistic content. Few words about what is being said. We find Arabic words like khawana, which means traitors, mortazaqa, which means mercenary, and also words in the Tunisian dialect like shena, which means troublemaker. As consequences, we find not only online violence, but it unfortunately turned into physical and verbal assault committed by members of another political parties in the Tunisian parliament, addressing her misogynistic words and insults, in addition to violent beatings. Our second example is the Tunisian dancer and singer Nermeen Sfar. So Nermeen received most hate comments on her Facebook Live videos during the lockdown, also every time she uploads a new song or a new video clip. So out of 676 comments, almost 75% of the comments are negative ones, including all 3 languages. Among these comments, we find that more than half of them are misogynistic, including the topics we have the word like da'ara, which means prostitution, clinique des fous, which means hospital of crazy people. As a result, Nermeen was victim of hate speech and has even received death threats from extremists. Looking closer into the video that Nermeen published to talk about her death threats she received, we find that people are gloating with words like tistahil, nartahu minnak, which means actually you deserve it and that we can get rid of you. Our last example is Rania Andouni, who is a young Tunisian activist who defends the queer community. Participating in recent protests against police violence, Rania faced a smear campaign and even threats, especially on social networks. She had been the victim of online harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence, including death and rape. Among the comments addressed to Rania, 81% present negative ones. However, we found that the most negative ones are written in Arabic and the Tunisian dialect, whereas positive ones are written in French. Among negative topics, we find words like death, die, idiot, and that almost half the comments present misogynistic content. Rania faced not only cyber violence, but also physical and verbal violence, and even got in prison. In fact, words on social media unfortunately turned into deeds, which have potentially led to her requesting and obtaining asylum in France. As a conclusion, we highlight the importance of conducting research on cyber violence. We should question the existing laws, if they're enough as a way to protect women on social media. Unfortunately, because of the cultural aspects, testimonies are not taken seriously. So we highly recommend raising awareness and organizing movements and creating campaigns by associations in order to further develop laws or even change ones. Also, we highly recommend the use of AI, which definitely facilitates the task of state by automatically detecting misogyny. These are references, and thank you for your attention. We're happy to answer all your questions.
Hello, Leila. Great initiative. I know, Salamet. Wish you the best of luck.